Welcome to Pearced Off. I am Jonathan MS Pearce, and this is a counter-apologetics segment on the Skepticule Podcast. So today I'm going to look a little bit into the problem of evil. Problem of evil is that there is so much suffering on earth. If God is all-knowing, he knows what to do about it. All-powerful, he knows, or he can do something to combat it. And all-loving, he's loving enough to want to do something about it. So there's all this suffering. Why is this suffering on earth? Now, this age-old debate back from Epicurus in Greek times has led Christians and other theists to come up with what are called theodicies. Now, theodicies are defenses or reasons why there is so much suffering on earth, to show in some way or to implore in some way that the suffering is not gratuitous. Because if the suffering is gratuitous, then God is obviously not all-loving. So the job of the theist is to show that the suffering is necessary for some reason, whether that be for a greater good or whatever. It is neither here nor there in this context. Because what I want to look at is one theodicy, and the theodicy is to do with heaven. Now, Christians, for example, often say that evil or pain or suffering is morally justifiable because there is a heaven, an eternal afterlife of bliss and perfection. So, for example, if a child dies of terminal cancer at the age of 1 or as a baby, then, it's all right because heaven awaits for that child or what have you. Any kind of suffering to humans can be balanced by this eternal paradise. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, this was a problem that the Jews came up with in the sort of intertestamental period and just before, in the Seleucid Empire, when you had the Greeks, the Hellenic sort of Jews ruling over the Jews of Israel, and they realized that they were being punished for being Jews, and they were God's chosen people. So how do we explain this? And they looked at the Greeks, and they saw this kind of idea of heaven in one form or another, and they said, here we go, we haven't in the Old Testament or in our rabbinic writings got this idea of heaven, and it's quite useful because actually it allows us to explain away how bad things can happen to good people, because an all-loving God surely wouldn't allow us good Jews to be punished, tortured, and so forth. So heaven as a concept developed out of this. It was kind of fulfilled a need, a gap in their theology. Now, the problem I want to point out today is that compensation is not moral justification. What I mean by this is that heaven is a compensation. So an evil or bad happens on earth to a person, and they are compensated by eternity in heaven. But this is not moral justification. It cannot morally justify the suffering and the evils that happen on earth. So, for example, in a real-world context, if I walk out onto the street now and punch someone clean in the face, and then give them £5,000 afterwards, my compensation of giving them £5,000 does not morally justify me punching them in the face. It doesn't make that a morally good act. The act is not morally good. The punching in the face is not morally good. It is a bad act, and I am excusing I am compensating that bad act by paying out £5,000. The paying out of that £5,000 is not a moral justification. Think of it in terms of a car crash where someone's, been driving recklessly. The insurance company pays out a compensation, but it doesn't make that reckless driving a good act. that driver was deemed reckless and morally judged as being reckless. So whenever this kind of theodicy is used, it is used invariably invalidly. Christians will use heaven to attempt to morally justify evils and suffering on earth, where actually what they're doing is showing compensation. Even if heaven does exist, they're showing compensation for suffering and evil on earth, but they are not showing moral justification for that. So heaven can never be used as a theodicy, despite what Christians may try to do. And it's just that little one point I want to show today, and hopefully the panel can mull it over. So, a quick one. I've been Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This has been Pearced Off, and please check out my blog at A Tippling Philosopher, and as ever, question everything.